Welcome in. We're doing some craziness for the March Madness. That's about to happen. We are finally in March, and it's been a blast so far. And at this point, we finally have a team that is officially in. SEMO's definitely going. They're dancing. They got their shoes on. They're all ready to go. But today we are focusing on the Big 12. And, of course, I had to bring a guy that knows all about it and covers it for CBB Review, Ariel Puterman. Come on, Ariel. Let the people know about you and where they can find you.
Yeah. Follow us on CB Review on all social media, Instagram, Twitter, wherever you find your news about college basketball. I'm super excited to talk about the Big 12, my favorite conference. I'm a KU grad, so I know all about it, and it's the best conference.
We won't hold that against you, though.
Yeah, we've had a little bit of beef with the Kansas connection, but we all know who the better Kansas school is, so it doesn't even matter.
It's just so rude. I can't even believe that you're taking those shots already. But man, it's going to be another tough one. And well, Wichita State today is going to be out without Jaquan Walton again. He's still out with a sickness, and they are trying to lock up that 6th seed in their tournament. So that'll be an interesting part. But thankfully, your team, entire conference has their seeds locked up. We know who's going to be playing. Top 4 seeds are all the regular people. KU clearly at number 1, having one of the best quadrant ones. Wins right now and setting records day after day. It seems like Texas came away with a big win to solidify the 2 spot. K-State and then Baylor rounding out the top 4. And so tournament happens this weekend, March 8th through the 11th. And I'm pretty sure you told us that, you should let them know that you get to go. You're going to be covering this for us, right?
Yep, absolutely right. I will be at the Big 12 tournament Wednesday through Saturday. I'll be at every single game, and I'm super excited. It's in Kansas City, right across the street from where I live, so should be a lot of great games, a lot of great teams, probably nonstop action. Hopefully a couple buzzer beaters in that little window of games.
Yeah, and I mean, that's just one of the things about especially the Big 12 is that everybody is so familiar with each other. They really get into it, and it's usually, I mean, you're very rarely going to see a score under 130 points, and if it is, it's a real grinder between 2 teams that are just really showing up defensively. And I mean, it's super impressive. It's a great conference, but I have to know, I'm pretty sure you're going to show some bias here, but who do you think is the team that's going to take home the Big 12 conference?
Yeah, it's going to be a close one. I really think there's 5 or 6 teams that can, but like you said, I'm a little bit biased, but also a little bit of home court advantage with it being in Kansas City. So I'm going to go with the Kansas Jayhawks. I think they're going to come into Saturday knowing they have the chance to lock up that number 1 overall seed, depending on how Alabama and Houston do. But I think it's theirs to lose right now, and if they win the Big 12, there's no doubt about it. And Sweet 16 Elite Eights in Kansas City this year, so they want it even more so they can get that semi-home court advantage in that second weekend. So I think they're going to have just enough. Jalen Wilson, DeJuan Harris, just to name a few of the really talented players on that Kansas team. And I think it'll be close. I think there's a lot of great players in the Big 12 in general, but I think Kansas just edges them out.
Yeah, and I mean, it's definitely impressive, but it really seems like it's been a back and forth between Texas and Kansas this year. They've been back and forth, just battling over and over. They've both been in the top 10 more often than not, and it's just been super impressive. But I'm taking Texas, but that's just because I really like the team. I think it's very well-rounded, and they're going through a rough spot and clearly just grabbed a big win, which will help them, but it's hard not to believe in the Jayhawks since they do have that home court advantage. And, well, I guess it's not really home court, but it does count. I mean, they play a lot at the, what is it, T-Mobile now? It's not Sprint anymore, right? It's T-Mobile Center. But, yeah. So you kind of touched on the KU players. Are there any other players that you think to watch? I mean, I really like Sir Jabari Rice, who clearly Mountain West player last year, really has shown up in big spurts for Texas and has some really consistent guard play that I'm just super impressive. But have to know, are there any players that you're just really dying to watch that people will need to be looking out for?
Yeah, I don't know how many games he's going to play, but it's going to be Eric Stevenson from West Virginia. He scored 23 or more in the last 5 games. He's been on a hot streak. West Virginia, I think with that win yesterday, that they kind of solidified themselves in the tournament, but they want to make sure they don't want to lose games. They played Texas Tech in the first round, who will be without coach Mark Adams. Kind of mini breaking news. They just announced that. So obviously Texas Tech's looking to make the tournament too. They're out right now. They need to win that game, but with the whole coaching situation and drama in the locker room, that might hurt them. So they might have that extra game, but then they'll play Kansas. But I think Eric Stevens is super talented, really great scorer. I'd love to see him kind of go on one of those March Madness runs where this guy can't miss, scores 30 points, maybe pulls off an upset, if not in the Big 12 tournament, then the NCAA tournament. So I'm really excited to see Eric Stevenson.
Yeah, and I completely get it. Former Shocker who's been traveling everywhere. It seems went to Washington there for a while. Then South Carolina has finally ended up at West Virginia. He's quite an impressive player. I mean, if you're sticking with Shockers, you might as well throw in Grant Sherfield because he's another one who's been just playing out of his mind. I mean, pretty much all season he's been a pretty consistent player and has really grown into himself. And so, but yeah, it's just such a fun conference to watch because they do have so many power players and. You already touched on it, but you took my dark horse to win in West Virginia because they do have a pretty nice road ahead of them, and they could easily take that down. But I just have to know, who do you think is a dark horse to win this conference?
Yeah, it's such a hard dark horse is such a hard word in the Big 12 because there's 6 ranked teams or close to ranked teams. I think Iowa State dropped out pretty recently. So I guess if you take one of the, I would have to go with TCU. They're very inconsistent, but they're getting healthy now. Mike Miles is healthy. Eddie Lampkin's healthy. And they got all their supporting cast and Ba, Oban, and all those guys. Just a really talented team. We saw them almost beat Arizona as the 8 seed last year in the round of 32. They've gotten even better this year when healthy. I think they can win a couple games in the Big 12 tournament, pull off a couple upsets. They have a really tough first round matchup against Baylor, I believe. So I'm kind of worried about that game. But if they can do that, then I don't see what's stopping them from winning the Big 12 as a 6 seed.
Yeah, and I mean, it's that you really nailed it on the head earlier when you said about inconsistency, because that's one reason I'm so nervous about that team in any format. Is just they are just so inconsistent on really both sides of the court. It's extremely frustrating to watch. But we've touched on all of that. Now I have to know, we're getting into March Madness. What teams do you think? How many teams from your conference do you think are going to make it, and who are they? I mean, that's the hardest question for everybody right now, it seems. But I'm curious to get your take on it.
Yeah, I know. I've been kind of going back and forth on this too. So I'll kind of go down the line. We got Kansas, obviously a lock, 1 seed lock. We got Texas. We got Kansas State. What a season they've had. I mean, they were supposed to finish last in the conference. And now they're a 2 seed in the tournament, probably maybe 3 seed. Keontae Johnson, another player to watch for. He's been unbelievable. Jerome Tang, probably coach of the year in all of college basketball, not even the Big 12. And then you got Baylor. Keontae George's health is a little bit iffy right now. He got hurt 3 games ago. He played last game, but he didn't look the same. So we'll keep an eye on that. So that's 4 teams right off the bat. And then you got TCU, kind of like I mentioned. They're looking good. You got West Virginia, who looks like they probably punched their ticket with that win against Kansas State yesterday. Iowa State, who kind of had a little rough streak, but they beat Baylor on the road yesterday. They lost Caleb Grill to personal issues. I don't really know the full story. I don't want to get into it because it's none of my business really, but they should be in it. And then it's when it gets a little bit tricky. You got Oklahoma State. They're on the out right now looking in. They've really struggled recently. They probably need to win a game or 2 in the Big 12 tournament. You got Texas Tech. I think at this point they have to win it all or at least make the finals. And then Oklahoma has to win it all. So I want to say 7 teams. I think Oklahoma State will sneak in. They'll beat Oklahoma in the first round. And then that might be enough. We'll see how the rest of the bubble looks. So I'm going to go 7. 6 for sure. 8 maybe. Or no, sorry. 7, 8 maybe. So Oklahoma State's the 8th team. My bad.
Yeah, man, it's tough. I'm so torn because it really after it. I'm even struggling to put. I mean, KU's clearly in, Baylor's in, Texas is in, but after that, and I struggled to. I mean, K State's probably. I mean, they've played well enough. Jerome Tang's an awesome coach and has really just spurred that program on. So I'm for sure locked in with 4. But after that, it's just all the. It's an unfair. They have an unfair advantage because everybody you play in the Big 12 is a quad 1 win, so that gives them a boost up. But I'm sure at least 4 are getting in, and then I'm like you gave great points for all the other teams, and it's just tough for me to go anybody outside of them unless one of those 4 doesn't win this conference.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Oklahoma beat Alabama by almost 30 this season. Alabama's probably the number 1 overall seed if it's not Kansas right now. Best team in the SEC by far. So it just shows how good the conference is, that our by far worst team is better than the best SEC team and probably one of the top 3 teams in the country. I wouldn't say they're better, but they crush them. So it's really unfair, and hopefully it'll set them up for March, because obviously there's no days off in March, and having to play up to your opponent sometimes hurts those teams. Like, I don't want to say Gonzaga because they always make it far, but it could be a reason why they've never won. Maybe Houston this year. We'll see. But hopefully Big 12 doesn't burn out and instead they use it as an advantage.
Yeah, and so gotta ask, is there a matchup that you really want to see out of the conference tournament that you're just excited to watch?
Yeah, there's about 10 matchups I don't want to see.
Of course, he's taking the field. Don't worry about it. He wants to watch every single game, but
yeah, seriously. I mean, there probably won't be any bad matchups, but if I had to pick one, it would be Kansas, Texas in the championship. We saw them split the season series. One at home, Kansas won at home, Texas won at home. So now in a neutral court, we'll see who's the better team. This could be also a Final Four matchup. There's really, if you plug and play TCU, Baylor, Texas, Kansas, you can maybe make an argument for Kansas State. Those could all be Final Four teams. Those could all be Final Four matchups. So the fact we're getting that into conference tournaments, pretty insane. And I think all those matchups would be great. But Kansas, Texas, I mean, Texas has a bunch of great scores. They got Marcus Carr, they got Serge Abari Rice, Timmy Allen's a great forward, and then Tyrese Hunter's a great defender. You pair them up against Jalen Wilson, who played well last game, but he struggled that first game. They did a good job on him defensively. You got Grady Dick, the really talented freshman, DeJuan Harris, I think the most underrated player in the country, just to name a few of those Kansas guys. So it would be a great matchup, great coaching matchup. Rodney Terry's done a good job. We'll see if they keep him around after this season. Obviously, the Chris Beard situation.
yeah.
So I think he deserves it, but it's not my decision. So we'll see what they go with. So he's playing for his future coaching career as well. So I would love to see that matchup.
Yeah, and he's really stepped in nicely for Beard with that whole situation going down. But I mean, Big 12 is clearly the dominant conference. Have to ask, which conference do you think stands the best chance in knocking out any of these teams that they face? Is there anyone that you're super worried about?
I wouldn't say I'm worried about, but I would say, I think the Big East. The Big East has a bunch of great teams up top. Creighton's really scary. We saw them almost beat Kansas in the round of 32 last year. They're healthy now. Colt Brenner, great player down low.
God, he's big.
Yep.
Big dude.
Yeah, he just makes them so much better. We saw he was out with mono for about a month. Earlier in the season, they really struggled, and then ever since then, they've just been a completely different team. Then you got Marquette. I'm still kind of iffy on Shaka Smart in March, besides that one VCU run. But this team looks great. Tyler Kolek's taking another level. Iguodaro's unbelievable. Omax Prosper, just Cam Jones, bunch of really talented players. You got Xavier. They got a really talented roster, and Sean Miller, who's known for some March Madness runs. And then UConn's been red hot recently. And you can't ever count out Villanova. Obviously no Jay Wright, but they've looked great the last couple of weeks. So I think Big East could have a couple teams go far. I think they could have a couple teams that can knock off these Big 12 teams. And who knows? It's also March. It's crazy. We thought we could get it down here last year, and then they had, I think they had 3 teams in the Elite 8. So anything could happen. But I think those 2 conferences are number 1 and 2 right now. And we should see a good portion of those teams represented in the Sweet 16 Elite 8.
Yeah. And Big East, I mean, I saw somebody list them as a mid-major, and that just blew me away because they had Creighton as one of the best mid-majors to watch. I'm like, that's not a mid-major anymore. It used to be back in the day, but man, Big East has really just shown up and been a really powerful conference. I mean, and that's what they're there for. I mean, it's definitely a basketball conference, and they're all super impressive teams and good on both ends of the floor, which definitely makes things even more difficult. So, gonna have to ask, do you think KU repeats? Or I mean, I think they have a good chance to, but man, it's definitely tough because March is just such a crazy month. That I think that is why they call it March Madness. I don't know. It does drive people crazy.
Yeah, exactly. It's so hard to predict, but I don't see a reason why not. I mean, we saw Georgia go back to back in football. why can't KU go back to back in basketball? They have the talent. It's pretty incredible what they've done. They've lost 74% of their scoring from last year, and they're still in this position. Obviously, Jalen Wilson's taken a huge jump. Kevin McCullough's a great defender. It's really about how good the supporting cast can be in March. We know what Jalen's going to be able to do, but can Grady Dick step up? Can DeJuan Harris have a good game? Can KJ Adams be good? All those guys. If they can't, then it might be a little bit tough, and they can even see themselves getting upset because Kansas last year they had Agbaji, who they knew was going to be good, but then they also had Christian Brown, who was going to have a couple good games. They had Remy Martin step up. They had David McCormick step up. So we knew that if Agbaji was having a bad game, then those other guys would step up. We haven't seen consistency with that this year. We saw a little bit in that 7-game winning streak to end the season before that Texas game, but it hasn't gone to a point this year where we're like, we know Grady Dick's going to step up today because that's what he does. So if those guys can just kind of take turns stepping up and not forcing all the pressure on Jalen Wilson, then yeah, they can win. I think on paper, they're one of the most talented teams, and they've got the best coach in college basketball and one with a lot of tournament experience and who knows how to win those big games. But if not, then I don't see how they can win. There's just too many good teams with good depth that can pull off that upset or knock them out in one of the later rounds.
Yeah, it's definitely just coming down to the fact that when you're looking at Kansas, it's what they get in the tournament, who they're all playing against, who's in their conference, who's in their regional. That's a big part of it, because having that difficult road of all these best teams coming after you every single day, it's just such of a grind. And even with, like you said, the inconsistency of the second person really stepping up and having that backup that they had last year, it just isn't happening this year. I mean, Grady Dick is an awesome player, but he hasn't been that consistent guy that you want, and it's extremely frustrating. But man, he's such a good player, and it's definitely interesting to see and going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to be rooting for Houston because, man, I just love Kelvin Sampson, that story, and the fact that he continues to just put teams together. I mean, the fact that they changed so much last year and made it so deep into the tournament, and now they're doing all the craziness they can right now and causing havoc. They're 28-2. That's a pretty impressive, and hopefully they can pull off a win against Memphis. But Memphis always gives everybody issues. I'm expecting that's another team that'll be.
Yeah, I'm personally rooting for Memphis. Just Kansas can get that 1 seed because we really
lock it in.
And if Houston jumps Kansas, then Alabama will probably take the South, and Houston will take the Midwest. So I don't want to have to stress about that in March, especially since I'm going to be at the Sweet 16 Elite 8 in Kansas City. So I'd rather watch the Jayhawks than the Cougars.
So mean. You got to see plenty of the Jayhawks all year. You want to see the Cougars. They need to take the Midwest for sure.
Yeah. I won't complain either way, but just a little bit of personal preference as a Jayhawk alum and a Big 12 lover. I'd rather see my Kansas Jayhawks in there.
All right. We're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much. Let people know, do you have any articles coming out this week? We're covering a lot of conference tournaments. I'm just curious what you have coming along the line and where they can find you.
A lot of conference tournaments coming up. Check out a couple that I've already started. WCC tournament preview. We got Big Sky. We got Big South Championship starting in a little bit. So check out all those. And then Big 12 tournament, we got all the power conferences. Check out a lot of talented guys on the CB Review staff. They're putting out great work. Check out all those previews, see how many we get right or wrong. Judge us that way.
It's always that's the fun part, is to see how badly, I mean, out of nowhere, you saw SEMO. I mean, that was just such an impressive track for them, and nobody could have predicted that. It's just crazy how March goes.
I had the Big South article, and Campbell's playing in the finals right now. They're the 7 seed, and I had them losing to the 2 seed. So call me an idiot for picking the 2 seed over the 7 seed, but that's just what March is, and it's so hard to predict that. But when it happens, it's awesome. So I'd rather be wrong than avoid the upset, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I'll be covering the MVC today. I'll be giving out rewards as Drake and Bradley tip off and face each other. Oh, it's going to be a blast, but make sure you go follow CBB Review. Make sure you follow Ariel. Does a lot of great work, and you get to see all of his fun content when he's at all the Jayhawks game and clearly covering Big 12 tourney.
At Ariel CBB on Twitter, ARIEL CBB. give me a
Perfect.
follow. I think I'm pretty funny, so
And it works out for you. I mean, I'll really enjoy your content most of the time. I do get annoyed, but that's just because we see things differently. But it's always a good time to make sure to give you a good ribbon and just have a good time talking to you. But really appreciate your time, and make sure you guys give them a follow. Enjoy the Big 12. A lot of big games today. Just flip on the TV. You have to be watching basketball if you want to be ready for March Madness, and we'll be covering all that moving forward. But really, thank you so much, Ariel, and we'll get out of here. And remember, as always, guys, to keep up the nonsense.